member will distribute and assist in the donning of life preservers. Instructions for their use are located inside the lockers and seat boxes. Emergency exits are located on both decks.
Hello guys, this is Love and welcome back to my channel.
Nobody liked their product, so they developed a new product called chewing gum. And so suddenly everybody was buying spearmint and doublemint and juicy fruit. But we'll talk about the building a little bit later on. The first building I'm going to talk about on the right-hand side is this one. This is called the Trump International Hotel and Tower. Designed in the year 2009, the building is 92 stories, 1,362 feet. It is, believe it or not, a curvilinear design. It looks like it's steel and glass, but it's not. It's actually 900 tons of concrete wrapped in steel and glass. There are 476 condos in there. There are penthouses, one which was sold for about $50 million. The man who bought it, you would never guess. The man who designed or came up with the idea of Beanie Babies, remember Beanie Babies? He has one of the townhouses in here. But in addition, there is a restaurant, there is a hotel, and of course, all this dark space is retail space, none of which has ever been leased. Now, Adrian Smith was the architect. The building is 1,362 feet. Adrian now has his own firm, Smith & Gill, and he's working on the tallest building in the world. How tall? Try 3,300 feet, 2.5 times the height of Trump Tower. By the way, Trump Tower is the second tallest building in Chicago. Coming up on your right, you have a black building. This black building is by the great German architect Mies van der Rohe. Mies came here from the Bauhaus School in Dessau, Germany. His philosophy of architecture, less is more. You'll notice there's very little architectural ornamentation on a building. The thin I-beams are the only ones that they don't serve any structural purpose, they merely add a little bit of surface texture. The building was originally designed for IBM, but today the lower 12 floors are the Langham Hotel, a British-owned hotel. The upper floors are home to the American Medical Association. Coming up on our right are the Twin Towers of Marina City, sometimes referred to as our horn buildings. Now these are rather unusual because the apartments are pie-shaped. Narrow when you walk in, they get wider as you go around the central core. The building has parking. It has, at one time it does have a marina, but it had ice skating rink, it had theaters, all kinds of shops, etc. It is the first residential building to be built on the river. The dates are 1964 and 1967. The architect, Bertrand Goldberg. Now Bertrand Goldberg was a student of Mies and he hated Mies's black boxes. He said there are no right angles in nature. So he liked curvilinear designs. We'll see another building by him later on in our tour. By the way, that building should get an Oscar. It's been in more movies than you can imagine. The Blues Brothers, While You Were Sleeping, The Fugitive, My Best Friend's Wedding, The Transformers, television shows, the Bob Newhart Show, the Chicago PD, Chicago Fire, I can go on and on. This is home to the American Bar Association, 1987. 250 lawyers have their offices in that building. And on the right side now is a typical warehouse that used to be along the river. Now folks, I have to tell you, about 130 years ago, this river was filthy. There was, and I have to tell you, barges, tugboats, and the river was just unbelievable. Well, this is one of the last vestiges. There are 6 bays to the right and 6 to the left. One was taken off of the winding of LaSalle Street Bridge. It's called the Reed Murdoch Building, and the architect is George Nimmons. The date, 1915. Today, it's a commercial office building, and you have 2 restaurants on the lower level. Now, on your right is an excellent example of a building that really is concerned about our environment. This is called 300 North LaSalle. The roof of this building has a park that absorbs rainwater. The building does not have an air conditioning tower. What it does is it takes the river water and cools the building. When the river water comes out, it is cleaner but warmer. We can't do that anymore because it affects the marine life in this river. Picard and Chilton were the architects, and I have to tell you, you're probably saying, marine life in this river? Folks, I have to tell you, we have identified 77 varieties of marine life. I've been on this river. This is my 39th year doing tours on the river. It's a lot cleaner. Would I go swimming in it? Not yet. To the right, we have one of the largest buildings ever built in America. This is known as the Merchandise Mart. It is second only to the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia. Its footprint, 5 acres, 4.2 million square feet of space, 8 miles of corridors, and 500 showrooms to the wholesale furniture industry. It is an Art Deco building, limestone exterior with a vertical thrust and setbacks. The bronze heads are all the great merchant princes. Now, the building originally was built to consolidate warehouses for the Marshall Fields Company, which today is Macy's. But during the Depression, they lost it. They didn't pay taxes. So the Kennedys bought it for a mere $16 million. They kept it from 1948 to 1996. You know what they got when they sold it? You would love a return on your investment. For their $16 million, they got $576 million. The 4 acres of property on your right, the Kennedys own that. Along with a couple other developers, they just finished this project. The building right here, where it says rent, is Wolf Point East. It's a new residential tower. The one coming up on your right here also is the Salesforce building. Now, the Salesforce building is a commercial office building. Both of these are by the architects Pelly, Clark, and Pelly. But probably even more important is the location. Wolf Point is where Chicago put down her roots. The first post office, the first general store, the first ferry boat across the river was here from Wolf Point. You know, people always ask me, where did the name Chicago come from? You talk about New York, you talk about the Big Apple. Well, Chicago, believe it or not, comes from the word Chicagua, which actually is Native American. We think it's a Miami or the Illinois tribe. What does it mean? You'd be surprised. Smelly wild onions and skunk grass. That's the meaning of our name. Hardly attractive. But that's because the Native Americans years ago used to harvest the skunk grass and wild onions along the banks of the river. Now, folks, we are turning down the North Branch. We're going to do the South Branch later on. When we turn, you're going to see a building on your left right here. This is called the Residences of River Bend. That building is by Picard and Chilton. It's a relatively new building based on a parabolic curve. Some of our large companies are in there, SC Johnson and Mort Salt. The sculpture piece is by Santiago Calatrava. It's called Constellation. The building coming up on your left here is the Residences of River Bend. Now, I have to tell you, there are 5 elegant townhouses on the bottom of this building and then condos. But all the hallways were put in the back. Why? Because these people paid top dollar to look down the river. Look what happened. This was all built after this one. This one was earlier. So they weren't too happy, but it is what it is. Now, the building is so narrow you couldn't put a parking garage in. So when you come home, you hand your keys to a valet. The valet puts your car on an elevator, takes it to your parking space provided you purchase one. They're $50,000. You pay a monthly HOA fee and real estate taxes. On your left is Fulton House. This is an old cold storage warehouse for butter, milk, and eggs. The building has been converted to luxury condos. The walls were 4 feet thick. That's why the balconies are recessed. I have to also tell you about this building. It was insulated with frozen horsehair and cork. When Harry Weiss got the job to convert it, he had to remove 500 truckloads of frozen horsehair and cork. On your left now are the Chicago River cottages. These are 2 5-story and 2 4-story townhouses. Now, those were built in the 1980s. I think the price at that time was about $660,000. But none of them ever sold till after COVID. One sold for well over $2 million. They're made to look like sailboats, gangplanks, portholes, and dockside privileges. Look to your right. What you're seeing is the East Bank Club. This was, try to picture this, no windows, no ivy, no trees, no plantings, because this was all industrial. And then, of course, the neighborhood changed. Of course, you can see it's much more neighborhood friendly. This is one of the most upscale health fitness centers in our city. This is where Barack Obama, Michael Jordan, and Oprah Winfrey used to work out when they lived here in Chicago. It was done in 1979. On your left now, you have a series of 70 row houses by Papa George and Haynes. These are made in the European row house style. They have a patio, a balcony, a rooftop terrace. I know you can't see it, but the courtyard in between is just beautifully landscaped. These units, I gotta tell you, there was a model put out in 2002. I went to see it, I thought, gee, I wonder if I could afford one, because I liked the location. Are you kidding me? They were 1.2 million. But here's the interesting thing. The day that the model opened, all 70 had deposits. And those people who could afford them, they're now selling for $2 to $3 million. So wise investment. On your right, you have a building that was converted. Originally it was the Wallace Press Building, which meant it used to print business forms. And then in the 1990s it was converted to the Riverbank Lofts. These are soft lofts. Let me explain what that means. A soft loft, an open floor plan, exposed brickwork, ductwork, timbers. Whenever you see a building that's got balconies added on, you know that it had a previous life. These units, when they come on the market, I'll tell you, if they're on the market for 2 weeks, I'm surprised, because usually after that, people grab them up as fast as they can. Now, if you will, look over to your left here, and in just a moment, you are going to see 2 white buildings coming up. This is called Kingsbury on the Park, and that one is Erie on the Park. All the steel on these buildings is exposed. You can see the balconies, the chevron design. These are by architect Luciano Roger. They're done in what we call the European industrial style. I have to tell you, they didn't go over real big in Chicago. These are the only buildings here by Luciano Roger. The building with the center blue and the 4 white corners, that one is the Montgomery. Right now it's condominiums. It used to be the corporate headquarters for Montgomery Ward. But perhaps more important is the architect. His name, Minoru Yamasaki. I know you probably never heard of him, but he is the architect who originally designed the World Trade Towers in New York, the original ones. Now, the park here is called the Montgomery Ward Park, but at this point, I would like to talk a little bit about Montgomery Ward. Montgomery Ward, after the fire, had $1,600 in his pocket. Decided he was going to put a 1-page catalog out there, and he was going to sell stuff to the rural farmers. Well, that catalog mushroomed to about 400 pages. I know we have a lot of young people, but perhaps some of you more mature people remember the Sears Roebuck Wish Book, Spiegel's, Montgomery Ward. I mean, you could buy lingerie, a saddle for your horse, you could buy car parts, oil, everything you could imagine. What happened, I think you all know. eBay, Amazon.com, Amazon, you call on 1 o'clock at 3 o'clock, and stuff sitting on your front porch. So times have changed a lot. But let's talk about Montgomery Ward for another reason. His original offices were on Michigan Avenue. And he used to look out and see dead animals, wagons, garbage, and he said, this city needs a better front yard. And what he did was to spend $500,000 of his own money, kind of the equivalent of $2 million today, to fight in the courts to save that land. Thanks to Montgomery Ward, our city has one of the most beautiful front yards. It's called Grant Park. If you don't get a chance, I do hope you get a chance to walk to Grant Park, see our beautiful Buckingham Fountain, which is modeled after the fountains at the Palace of Versailles. Also, check out Millennium Park. The Bean is there. Jules Pence's fabulous Pritzker or Crown Fountain is there. Just if you walk through the parks, it is just amazing. On your right now, this is the warehouse for Montgomery Ward. This is where they build your orders. Now notice the horizontal bands of brickwork, and notice the architectural ornamentation. Looks a little Frank Lloyd Wright-ish. Well, I have to tell you, it actually wasn't Frank Lloyd Wright. Frank Lloyd Wright did no commercial architecture in Chicago other than the interior of the Rookery Building lobby. But Schmidt, Garden, and Mart were the architects for this building. Mr. Schmidt Metroliner presses. Each press could crank out 70,000 copies per hour. That's 70,000 copies per hour. Who buys newspapers anymore? No one. We get our news on our phones, on our televisions, on our computers. So this land has been sold. And they have started demolition. All of this is coming down. All of this. This is the site of Chicago's first casino. Bally's got the bid. It's a $3 billion project. They're putting up a 34-story, 500-room hotel, a 3,000 person music venue so they can have groups come in. There'll be several other hotels, restaurants, all sorts of other entertainment options, and a huge casino. I understand the casino might be 3 or 4 stories. You can see now they're ready to start. They actually have started tearing the building down on the other side. So at this point, I'd like to talk a little more about the history of our city. The very first people who lived here were Native Americans. Potawatomi, Crow, Kickapoo, Blackfoot, they got along fairly well together. In 1673, the French sent 2 explorers down the Mississippi River from the city of Quebec. And what they did was they came down, their names were Pierre Marquette and Louis Joliet. They were to identify land for New France. Well, they identified a location for a fort where you got on the boat. If you walk across the Michigan Bridge and look down, you're going to see metal filings in the sidewalk of what originally was Fort Dearborn. Now, this city didn't grow fast. The area was prairie, and more prairie. In 1779, our first permanent non-Native American residents arrived. His name was Jean-Baptiste Pointe-du-Sable. But in the 1830s, this city's population was, are you ready? 36. But then the Erie Canal opened up, and people flocked to Chicago from the East Coast and from Europe. And by 1870, our population was well over 300,000. When on the night of October 8th, 1871, a devastating fire occurred. Now that fire, actually, we don't know how it started. I know you've heard that bogus story about the cow kicking over the lantern. That's a New York journalist story. We don't know how the fire started. We do know that Mrs. O'Leary had cows. She had vagrants who slept in the barn. They could have knocked over a lantern. We know there was a meteor shower that night. That could have started it. We also know that her son ran all the gambling in the Union Stockyards, which did not burn. And he used to have poker games in the barn. Somebody could have dropped an ash on a bale of hay. The fire burned for 3 days, okay? When it got to the river, everybody said, oh, it's going to stop. Well, it didn't. It jumped the river and continued for 24 more blocks. Many of you will walk down Michigan Avenue and see our water tower. The water tower survived the fire. Across the street was the pumping station. 1871, state of the art, couldn't help to put the fire out. What happened? The pumping station roof was wood. It caught fire, collapsed on all the equipment. It was like a comedy of errors that night. Well, after the fire, everybody wrote our city off. You're done. Chicago's burned out, that's it. Well, 1 week later, we started rebuilding. 19 years later, we were ready to put our best foot forward. And the United States government announced that they were looking for a site for the World's Columbian Exposition. This was a big deal, and it was supposed to be one of the most major events in this new country. Boston, Baltimore, New York, Washington, they all wanted it. We had to have it. We sent our best politicians to lobby Congress. And you know what? I'm glad you're seeing this. The Chicago River is a working river. That gravel, that's what is the concrete that helps to build our city. So anyhow, getting back, what happened? We sent our best politicians to lobby Congress, and we got the fair. New Yorkers, not too happy. They talked about those windy windbags from Chicago, and that's why we're called the Windy City. Now the fair opened on May 1st of 1893. It closed on November 1st of 1893. And what happened? We went ahead and we hired Frederick Law Olmsted, the man who designed Central Park. We drained 1,000 acres of swampland in Washington and Hyde Park on the southeast side. We planted 1 million trees. And then we hired Daniel Burnham to be the chief architect. He hired over 200 architects. Each one of them designed a building for the fair. And I have to tell you, the fair was a huge success. The buildings were all made out of a temporary material called staff. Wood, straw, plaster, painted white. I don't know if anybody read the book, The Devil in White City. Anybody? It's an excellent book by Eric Larson. Now, so all of a sudden, We got the fair going, got these buildings. We wanted a symbol, just like Paris for her World's Fair in 1884. She put up the Eiffel Tower. Now, I don't know how much you know about the Eiffel Tower, but the Parisians hated that thing when it went up. They wanted it torn down. I'm sure most of you at least watched some of the Olympics. It was the focal point of the Olympic Games. I have to tell you, did you know that Gustave Eiffel offered to build an Eiffel Tower for us for our fair, twice the height of the one in Paris? We thought about it, and then we thought, we need something by an American. And we hired a man by the name of George Ferris from Southern Illinois. He was a bridge builder. He built the first Ferris wheel. The height of a 10-story building, there were 38 Pullman boxcars, and each boxcar held 60 people. That's 1,800 people on the Ferris wheel at once. And it made one revolution every 27 minutes. We didn't have piped-in music, so one of the boxcars was left empty. They hired an orchestra, and the orchestra found a song that was 27 minutes long. They would play it. When they were done, the Ferris wheel was back, people exited, and another group got on. Please don't ask me the name of the song. I think the people at the History Museum don't even know it, because I'll be honest with you, I think they burned every copy of it. They were so tired of listening to it. The fair brought 28 million people to Chicago. In 1933, the heart of the Depression, 30% unemployment. We had people in bread lines, and we're hosting the 100th anniversary of the city of Chicago. Well, people came. They saw new cars, new homes, dishwashers, new appliances, washing machines, toasters, and it raised their spirits so much that the president asked us to keep it on for an additional year. Now, the reason I'm telling you this, in a few minutes, and you probably see it, there's one on our boat, the flag of the city of Chicago. 4 red stars. The first one, the Fort Dearborn, 1803. The second red star, the 1871 fire. The third one, the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition. And the fourth one, Century Progress. The 2 blue stripes, Lake Michigan and the Chicago River. And the 3 white stripes, land to the west, land to the north, and land to the south. Look at the tunnel under here. Why is that there? Well, in 1838, the railroad came to Chicago. We are the rail center of this nation. Most of the trains that go from the East Coast to the West Coast, from New Orleans up to Minnesota, pass through the city of Chicago. The tunnel, those holes in the tunnel are there to get the diesel fumes out. Now we're going underneath one of our double-decker bridges. This one, automobile pedestrian traffic on a lower level, and our elevated train on the upper level. By the way, all of our bridges open, but we don't open them because someone in a sailboat wants to go down. Traffic would be backed up to Indiana and Ohio. Now look to your right. This is a relatively new building. Can you see? You can see right through it. It's very narrow. These beams are some of the largest that cantilever over the river and the tracks. The building is by Getchen Partners. On the roof of this building, there are 4 tuned mass damper systems. These are 460,000 gallon tanks of water. Why? Because the building moves from north to south. So when the wind blows it to the north, the mass damper systems go to the south. When the building is pushed to the south, the rollers go to the north. Getchen Partners have won numerous awards. That's a relatively new building, about 2 years old. Another award-winning building right here, 1991. This is by Perkins and Will. Now, see the raised area? There are railroad tracks under here. Well, if those trains ever jump that track, people, they're going to take down this building. So what Perkins and Will did was even very clever. They took trusses. A truss is like a bridge. See this black part, the windows here? This is their parking garage. That is their IT center. But this whole section is hanging off 5 trusses. I can run my hand underneath this building. Look up and you'll see one of the trusses right there. Look up, there it is. So that building is suspended off those trusses. 1991, numerous awards for architecture and engineering. Now the building on your right is True North Riverside Plaza. It is an Art Deco building. It is limestone, it has the vertical thrust setbacks. It is by Halliburton Wood, which by the way is doing business still in Chicago after 130 years. This is the first public plaza. Quickly, if you would, look to the left. Now look to the right. See how clean this building, how filthy this one is? This is what happens when you burn fossil fuel. Most of our buildings have been cleaned. This one has not. It needs a bath is what has to happen. Now, coming up on your right, starting with this black building right here, the next 4 buildings are all by the firm of Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill. It's called Gateway Center. The 2 black buildings are identical. Now, I know you're probably saying, oh, those are by that Mies van der Rohe. They're not. They look like it, but Mies became the director of architecture at the Armour Institute of Technology. And many young architects in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s studied under him at IIT. And as a result, they were indoctrinated into that international style. Now, if you look under, you'll see the trains. You're probably saying, I wouldn't want to work in those. The noise, the vibrations, what about the diesel fuels? Well, I have to tell you, I've been in all these buildings. You cannot feel the vibrations. They're so well acousticized, you can't hear the noise. And to be very, very honest with you, the diesel fuels are filtered up to the top. But let me go one step further. In the 1950s, this whole area here was the most disgusting area in Chicago. It was called Skid Row. Sleazy hotel, gin joints, and adult movie theaters. Today, it is our West Loop area, one of the fastest growing areas, both residential and commercial. McDonald's moved their corporate headquarters to the suburb of Oak Brook, built a new building here on top of what used to be the site of Oprah Winfrey's Theater. The building on your right is the 1970s. Those are 63, 65, this is 70. We're getting a little tired of steel and glass. So these are precast panels. But the most important building is this little black one right here with the cross bracing. Now, it was originally home to the Mid-American Commodities Exchange. Traders used to trade on the floor using hand signals. You can't have peers or buttons or columns if you're trading millions of dollars worth of stocks. So all the weight was distributed around the perimeter with the X bracing. If you walk down Michigan Avenue, you're going to see another building with this bracing. It's called the John Hancock, or 870 North Michigan. The building on your right is the last one in Gateway Center. Notice there's a little kink in the building. James DeStefano decided he wasn't building another box. He followed a natural bend in the river. Someone said to him, well, what are you going to use for architectural ornamentation? He said, the building's across. He used concave and convex glass, creating a glass curtain wall. Look at how it looks. It's like a kaleidoscope of color and design. That's 1983. Now coming up on your right, one of the largest post offices ever built in America. This was done in 1931. Why? People, we were shipping for Spiegel, Montgomery Ward, and Sears. And Sears, I don't know how many know this, they used to ship entire kits to build a house. You would get the lumber, the plumbing, the electrical, the tools, the instructions. I had a man last Saturday on the road who said he was in California, he lives in California, and his uncle built one of those houses and he's living in it now. He said, still there. Now this is a major expressway that runs through here. The building was sold for $20 million. Unfortunately, 2007, not a good year. We were in a recession and the developer could not get financing. So the building sat and chunks started falling on the expressway. The city was this close to claiming eminent domain, where they take over a building, you know, and it was sold to 601 West, which is a New York developer. I have to tell you, I've seen this building before and after. The roof is 4 acres. There's parks, basketball courts, a vegetable garden. Not your typical office. There's no cubicles here. Open floor plan. There's a huge food court. There's bocce ball courts, miniature golf. I mean, it's just amazing. Some of the biggest tenants, Walgreens, Verizon Wireless, and also Uber are taking space in that building. This is our new post office, 1995. Notice the green glass lobby, how huge it is. I had the pleasure of touring this one with Mr. Knight, the architect from California. I said to him, why such a large lobby? He goes, well, we're hoping to lease it for weddings, bar mitzvahs, and graduations. I'm thinking, who the heck would want to have their wedding in a post office lobby? Last year, I had a woman who said her daughter was getting married there in October. Now, the lobby at the old post office is beautiful, and that one I know is used. But this has become a state-of-the-art facility, and it really has improved the function of our postal service in Chicago. Now if you will look to your left, this is called South Bank, a whole new community. Look at all these high rises. The building right here behind that limestone kind of stadium area, that's the Cooper. Those are townhouses and condominiums. But look at this one. Look what it says, industrial modern condos. This just opened about maybe 6 months ago. These are condos made, you remember those riverbank lofts I talked about? These are made to look like that. In other words, what they have is open floor plans, exposed brickwork, ductwork, etc. And I understand they're selling quite well. On your right, on your left here, this is by Bertrand Goldberg, the man who did Marina City. This is called River City. Now there were supposed to be 4 of these that undulate along the river. What happened? The city of Chicago goes in 1985. Remember, this is 20 years later. The city goes, well, you know, it's going to be too congested. I don't think we can build it, so it never happened. Well, the city was wrong, because this building is the only first phase, but the area has changed dramatically. There are 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units there. There's a 1-acre climate-controlled park inside, a marina, and I have to tell you, when I walked over to tour this building, I will admit I was looking over my shoulder because the neighborhood was pretty dicey at the time. These folks had nowhere to shop in '85, but look what's happened. Marshall, 7-Eleven, DSW, University of Chicago, Whole Foods, they even have a Target. Everybody's got to have a Target. This is the British International School right here. And I mean, this area, look at all the new buildings. So this is all within 20 years. This is called our South Loop area. Now look to the right, there's a big brown building coming up with 2 black stacks. That building is a former power plant. And what it did was to provide power for Union Station and all the activity here, which is the staging area for Amtrak and Metro. I'll repeat what I said earlier. We are the rail center of the nation. So all the trains that go from the East Coast to West Coast, from down in New Orleans up to Minnesota, pass through the city of Chicago. The building, look at it, it's got bandages, it's patched up. Fortunately, it's not being occupied, thank goodness. It used to burn fossil fuel. We don't burn that anymore. We burn nuclear power here in Illinois and wind power. And I have to tell you, we have more nuclear power plants than any other state in the Union. Why is this thing still here? Your guess is as good as mine. Preservationists want to keep it. I had an architect from Belgium about 2 months ago on the boat. He goes, that would make a great restaurant. I'm like, what is this man seeing that I'm not seeing? Maybe he saw the stacks and he thought, barbecue? I don't know. But people, the river's too narrow. You can't walk people across 17 sets of railroad tracks. So I don't know, it's just sitting. The only good thing, nobody is working in that building because I don't think it's structurally sound. These are our bridge houses. There's not a bridge house here, but look out and you're going to see a tall building with vertical white lines. That building is known as NEMA. NEMA is the tallest apartment building in Chicago right now. It's 76 stories tall. It's by an architect from San Francisco, Raphael Bernoulli. But I have to tell you, I had a gentleman, I get a lot of information from our guests. He said, I'm from Uruguay, and Raphael Bernoulli is one of our architects. But he said, we only have 3 million people, we don't build like this, so he came to San Francisco, so that's why he's here in this country. What the heck is all of this? This is 62 acres of land that Chicago offered Amazon. They were going to build a distribution center here. Well, what happened? They came here, we put through Canal Street, that tree's lined up there, the street hasn't opened yet, but it used to stop at Roosevelt Road. Now it goes all the way to Chinatown. Well, I have to tell you this. Amazon backed out. So we are developing it. Skidmore is the principal architect. Related Midwest is the developer. And if you see the sign, it says, here comes the 78. This will be the 78th community in our city. We have Bucktown, Logan Square, Hyde Park, Jackson Park, I can go on and on. This will be the 78th. But the first building going up here is called the Progressive Institute. People, it's not only an unusual building, but it is going to be the most high-tech training facility in the country. And they're going to specialize in not only high-tech technology, but artificial intelligence. And the plan is to train 7,000 a year young people. 2,000 of them, by the way, are coming from underprivileged areas and have that brain power stay here in Chicago. Now, if you look to your right, you're going to see the staging area of Amtrak and Metro. This is where your trains get cleaned up, get taken care of, and move on their way. I would like to switch gears now and talk a little bit about the people who built the city. And one in particular, since we're heading toward Chinatown, the Chinese. You know, I know a lot of people don't realize this, but the Chinese are the ones who did all the grunt work building the Intercontinental Railroad and connected the East Coast to the West Coast. And when that golden spike was driven in Utah, the railroad was finished, they were discriminated against. San Francisco didn't want them. Los Angeles didn't want them. So a man by the name of P.T. Moy came to Chicago. He liked it here. We liked him. He wrote to family and friends. The first year we had about 80 Chinese. Our population now, well over 25,000. They built homes. They built schools. They built laundries. They built restaurants. They built parks. And then what happened in the 1950s, the government decided we needed yet another expressway right through the heart of Chinatown. So they lost a lot of their green space, a lot of schools and parks, but I think the city of Chicago was feeling a bit guilty. What happened? We gave them a new park. And before I talk about Pingtown Park, I want to mention to you that we are a city of immigrants. This year alone, since August, we welcomed 45,000 new people to our city. If you ask me where there's an Italian neighborhood, a Polish neighborhood, a Ukrainian neighborhood, a Hispanic neighborhood, we have all these ethnic communities. Now, starting with this fence coming up here, right there, that chain link fence, this is Pingtown Park. Pingtown Park was a gift Chicago gave to the Chinese community. It's 12 acres. The red railings are there because red is a symbol of good luck. There's their new field house. There are basketball courts there, indoor swimming pool, etc. And if you look, there's an orange boathouse coming up. You're probably saying, what the heck do they need a boathouse for? Well, one of the characteristics of the Chinese community, every year, as part of their culture, they do the dragon boat races. And so the dragon boats are stored in there. But look beyond that, there's 2 murals underneath those viaducts. And I have to tell you, I don't care where you live in the world. I've been all over, and I gotta tell you, there's graffiti everywhere. But for some reason, those 2 murals have been left untouched. And the reason is these people use that space. They have Tai Chi classes in there. They have their Chinese children's orchestra performing in there. There's always something going on. Today, of course, it's quiet. It's a weekday. But you can see they're supposed to represent the hanging scrolls of ancient China. Now, if you look straight ahead, you're going to see a little pagoda. That is the terminus for our water taxi, which is right behind us, that big yellow boat. If you want to go to Chinatown today, get on the water taxi. It'll drop you off right here. You walk 2 blocks and you are in Chinatown. At least 35 restaurants, a fabulous cultural center, shops, and a beautiful entrance arch which says in Chinese, all are welcome. Now Captain Joe is turning the boat around. Look in front of you. You have one of the largest vertical lift bridges. And people always say to me, oh, can't you guys in Chicago afford a bucket of paint? We're working on it. But that bridge, I gotta tell you, is too low for us to go underneath. If we went underneath there, we would lose our heads in our wheelhouse. What's it for? There are 2 sets of tracks. How do you get the trains across the river? So they go across on the 2 sets of tracks. Now I want to talk about what's on the other side of that river. And I want to emphasize immigrants in our city, because our city was built on the back of immigrants. If we were to go under that outer mile, you would come to what used to be known as Union Stockyards. Union Stockyards had 2,400 pens. Cattle, sheep, pigs were shipped in. We used to slaughter as, believe it or not, a full basketball court. And there is the fountain that just went off. They just turned it on for the Democratic Convention. It was shut down for 2 years because they forgot to drain it at steel mills. We were second only to Pittsburgh. Now, how many people work there? Let's start with the steel mills. 18,000 immigrants. Most of them are all closed. In fact, they're all closed. The stockyards, you would never imagine how many people work there. 42,000 people. And I know a lot about the stockyards, and I'll tell you why. I lived 2 blocks from there. I grew up from there. And when the wind, like today, is in the right direction, ooh, believe me, you know what neighborhood you lived in. I have one thing that I can say. Most of the kids that are in a 4-H are farm kids, right? I was one of the first 4-H members here because we kept our little cow, Daisy, over in the stockyards. They let us keep her there, and we were able to show her for the 4-H gala. Now, 2 other things, and then I'll give you a break. 3 other things. What drives Chicago today? Pharmaceuticals, banking, the insurance, and manufacturing. We are one of the biggest manufacturing cities. In fact, those of you who love your cell phones, which I do too, thank a Chicagoan. 1974, that cell phone was made at Motorola here in Chicago. 2 different buildings. Though Hancock we don't see because it's on the north part of Michigan Avenue. But this is the Willis Tower. So as long as we're looking at it, let me tell you about it. There's a lot to say. It's 110 stories. For 25 years, it was the tallest building in the world. The building actually has 60 caissons holding it up. The building sways are rotating 18 inches. Why? When you have 70-mile-an-hour wind gusts down here, at the top of that building, it's hurricane force, 140 mile an hour. And we have 70, and we have it quite often. So the building flexes, so there is no structural damage. If you don't believe me, go up there on a real windy day, go to the restroom on the 100th floor observation deck, and you will see the water literally sloshing around the toilets. Now, the building was designed by Bruce Graham. He was with Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. The engineer was Dr. Fosler Kahn, who just passed away not too long ago. The Albert Einstein of engineering. He was from Bangladesh. They both worked for Skidmore. The building was Sears Roebuck moved out in the 1990s. And I have to tell you an interesting little story. The design of the building is quite unique. As the story goes, Bruce Graham, who was the architect, went to a dinner with the CEO of Sears. And he was trying to explain his vision for the building. So he took out a pack of Lucky Strike cigarettes. And he went like this. You know how the cigarettes came out at different levels? Well, that was the design of the building. It's 9 75-foot boxes bundled together. It's called tubular construction. The building itself, 25 floors, are occupied by United Airlines because their hub is here in Chicago. Sears moved out in 1991. See this building? It's not a building, it's a structure. This is fabulous. It's doing its job today. We have 3 of those in Chicago. They're the equivalent of ice makers in your refrigerator. What they do is they take water, cool it, send it to some of the high-rise buildings. We have 3 of them. By doing so, it cuts down on the amount of energy needed to cool our buildings. We don't have brownouts here in Chicago. So, coming up on the right, the pink building is 311 South Wacker. That is by Cone Pedersen Fox. They're a New York-based firm. They've done a lot of nice buildings in Chicago. Look at that gorgeous entranceway. That is, the building dates to 1987, 85, and there's a crown on top of it that is illuminated with 1,400 fluorescent fixtures, which reminds me, if you get a chance tonight, go outside. You will appreciate how beautifully lit most of our buildings are. This building on your right, architecturally insignificant, but see the mural where that plug is at? Well, that's where you are at on the river. The architects or the owners decided they needed something to call attention to the building. Now look straight ahead. There is a white building, 2 triangles joined by the hypotenuse. This park, no place to sit. 2 of the trees died. The waterfall doesn't work. It was an old parking garage. Harry Weiss did this building. He wanted 10 more floors. The city zoning board said not going to happen. So he tore the parking lot down and said, I will give you a free public park. Are you kidding me? There's no place to sit, the waterfall doesn't work, and the trees are dead. They got 10 floors of prime real estate. So you can see the difference of what happens. Now coming up on your right, look at this building. This building right here is 1961, not important, but the one coming up sort of is. That's a 1971 building, the white one, based on that steel grid. Both of these are by Skidmore owning Samaro. But the idea was to try to cut down on the amount of energy necessary to cool the building. So by doing this grid, covering it over with granite and pushing the offices back, today, notice the shadow? It cuts down on the amount of energy necessary to cool the building. Also coming up on your right, another rather interesting building. Look at the corners. 4 serrated corners, 4 corner offices per floor, 16 corner offices per floor, 2 40-story towers. Why all the corner offices? This was the home of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, and all the traders wanted corner offices. Now, they have merged with the Board of Trade. These large windows, those used to be 2 block-long trading floors. And the weight of them with all these hundreds of traders would have caused these 2 towers to go in. So what Fujikawa Johnson did, starting with the first floor, every floor is a ½ inch back. They built it like this, the weight pushing down right at those 2 towers to 2 perfectly 90-degree angles. On your right, the Civic Theater building, home to our Lyric Opera. There's a 10-story stage, a 3,800-seat theater, an office building on top of this, and the man who financed this, Samuel Insull. He had a mistress. She was an aspiring opera singer. She didn't make it at the Met in New York, so he spent $28 million to build this edifice for her. She did not make it in Chicago either. I don't think she was very good. But what happened? 2 months after this opened, the stock market crash occurred. Mr. Insull lost all of his money. His mistress, he was found in a tunnel in Paris. He had had a massive heart attack, and he was there with just 25 cents in his pocket. The building on your right is by Getchen Partners. Same ones who did that narrow building here. This one is known as the Bank of America building. It has a 4-story tall lobby. Those inverted columns are actually concrete wrapped in steel. And notice the setbacks for the offices to gain more light in the offices. This building just opened in 2022. Now coming up on your right is a red brick building. This building is not important, but the site is. It was here back in 1861 that the first Republican National Convention was here. It was a temporary building called the Wigwam. And here is where a virtually unknown politician, a lawyer, tall, gangly, not very good looking, was nominated to be the Republican candidate for president. All right? This is where Abraham Lincoln was nominated. Now, Abraham Lincoln was one of 4 presidents from our state. Besides, that's the elevator. Besides Lincoln, President Grant, President Obama, a lot of people don't realize, but about 60 miles from here, in a tiny little farming community called Dixon, that is where Ronald Reagan was born. This is 333 West Wacker. This building follows a natural bend on the river and the grid of the city streets. We call that contextualism in architecture. The building has 2 shades of polished blue glass and 2 shades of polished granite on the bottom. Anybody see the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off? This is the building that they used for Ferris Bueller's father, his office. This is our Riverwalk. You start here, you got 1.3 miles, you walk right to Lake Michigan. Years ago, you used to have to go up the steps, cross the busy street, go down. Now you just walk underneath. This ramp was put in for the disabled. I have to tell you, it's a little steep. If you let your wheelchair go, you probably hit the bottom at about 70 miles an hour. I'm surprised they're not going to plan on hosting the Winter Olympics here. They did finally put in an elevator. These silver things are called eyelashes. They keep the dirt and rust from falling on pedestrians walking underneath the bridges. The big black box here, tonight at dusk, 36 cameras will project on the entire facade of the merchandise mart. It's called Art on the Mart. It's the largest screen in the world. And they usually do, I think they're doing some George O'Keeffe and some of the contemporary artists. By the way, every section of our Riverwalk is different. This is called the jetty. Notice the little piers that come out? You can rent a pole, bring a fishing pole, and you can fish here. Now I know you're all saying, yeah, but did they ever catch anything? I have seen them catch fish. Would I eat them? No. But nevertheless, it's a great environmental teaching area. This is our infinity fountain, and nobody is in it. The fountain is only about 1.5 inches deep. But these bubblers, the kids love to sit on them. And I think there's one little boy that can't wait to get up there. He's looking, I think he's getting tempted. I think he's probably going to go up there. But what I love about our Riverwalk, every section is something new. Here you can get gelato, you can sit and watch the boats go by. On your right now, this is an area, we're going to build an underground walkway and a walkway all along here. What's going on here? This was the original site for the Chicago Spire. Unfortunately, 2007, as I mentioned earlier, we were in a recession. The developer from Ireland went bankrupt. The property, some of the infrastructure was in, but just 2 years ago, Related Midwest and Skidmore, Owings & Merrill got the contract. They're putting up an 850-foot tall building. Owings & Merrill. It's in a kind of a contemporary Art Deco style. The green glass building coming up is called the Gleacher Center. Now, the Gleacher Center is the downtown facility for the University of Chicago. Their main campus is on the city's southeast side. Looks like Oxford, beautiful campus. But look at this west wall, no windows. There are 27 classrooms in that wall. And Dirk Lohan designed it. Someone said, well, why no window? Beautiful, look out the window. He said, I know, but students should pay attention to what's going on in the classroom. It has paid off because they have produced, the University of Chicago, 99 Nobel Prize winners, more than any other university in the world. Now if you look straight ahead, you're going to see the Wrigley Building. Tower to your left, 1921. The tower to your right, 1924. The clock tower modeled after the Gerardo Tower in Spain. The building itself was the first to be illuminated, the first to be fully air conditioned. I already told you that the Wrigley's came here to sell gum or soap. That was not successful. The other thing I want to mention to you about the building, the stadium area. Before I talk about it, look at the building with the American flag. That is the LaSalle Wacker building. Notice the center tower is pushed back. Why? Because we did not have central air conditioning in the 20s. So how do you get cross ventilation on a day like today? That's why the architects Holbert and Hurt did that. But this is where the third worst marine disaster in our country occurred. Because on July 24th, 1915, a boat called the Eastland was tied up. She was taking 2,500 passengers from the Western Electric Company, their families and the employees on an outing to Michigan City. The boat had always had stability problems. Nobody could prove it. That fateful day, it was raining. They had put additional lifeboats on after the Titanic went down. People went to the bottom of the boat because it was raining. She rolled on her side. 844 drowned. 22 entire families lost all their family members. The building on your right, modeled after the bell tower at the Florence Cathedral. This is by the Spanish architect Ricardo Wolfio. And the gray building on your right, this is home to the Leo Burnett. This building is a column within a column with a column. There's 3 columns inside. It has wraparound non-weight-bearing windows. The skin of the building is 2 shades of polished granite. The architects were Kevin Roach and Jay Dinkaloo. This is home to the Leo Burnett Company. Amongst their clients, McDonald's, United Airlines, Kellogg's. They're the ones that came up with Tony the Tiger, Charlie the Tuna, the Pillsbury Doughboy, to name just a few. And now, if you look, this is our Vietnam Veterans Memorial. There is a plaque with more than 3,000 names there of men and women who fought in the Vietnam War in Chicago. Look up the building with the gold top. It's a gorgeous building. The skin is green serpentine stone. The top of that building is 24 karat gold. What was the inspiration? Well, the Burnham brothers, the sons of Daniel Burnham, went to a New Year's Eve party. They put a bottle of champagne on their table, green glass with gold foil. That was the inspiration. As we go under, I'm going to ask you to look up. There is a beautiful building here called the former Jewelers Building, right there. 4 Tempiano and a Belvedere on the top. The building is clad in terracotta. It's called the Jewelers Building because back in the 20s when we had a lot of gangsters running around here, people used to, jewelers would drive their car onto an elevator and would take them to their floor so they didn't have to walk around with their cachet of diamonds, rubies, and emeralds. Okay? Well, I have to tell you, this top of that building at one point during that time, it was called the Stratosphere Lounge, frequented by one of our more infamous residents. His name, Al Capone. As a Chicagoan, I'd like to offer a disclaimer. Al Capone was not one of our boys. He was from Brooklyn. We merely gave him a job. He told his wife he was selling used cars. Come on, $3 million? He was into bootlegging, gambling, prostitution, every vice you can imagine. Now, as we go under this bridge, this is called the DuSable Michigan Avenue Bridge. It's double-decker, modeled after the Alexander III Bridge in Paris. But if you will, for a moment, look to your left. This beautiful neo-Gothic building, this is called the Tribune Tower. It was the corporate headquarters for Tribune newspaper. They have since moved out. The building's converted to luxury condominiums. The glass building right here is called our Apple Store by Sir Norman Foster, who's a British architect. It's supposed to look like an iPad. I don't know if you think it does, but there's a 25,000 square foot retail space with Apple products at a lower level. Now, somebody asked me about landfill, sir. All of this is landfill. 17,000 homes and businesses after the fire pushed in here. It was a disgusting area, and then in the 60s we began to develop it. This is, the two brown buildings here are the largest hotel in Chicago. They're called the Hyatt Regency. There's an East and West Tower. 2019 rooms designed by A.F. Steve & Sons. Do we have anyone on board from Philadelphia? You know your Liberty Tower? There was the model for it. The needle top building in between is called 2 Prudential Plaza. Now, I'm going to ask you to focus for just a moment. Between this white and black building, there is another building. You'll see it with these undulating white balconies. That building is called Aqua. What is Aqua? Aqua means water. The building actually has a Radisson Blue Hotel on the bottom, but those are condos. And the white balconies represent the waves on Lake Michigan. Now, the building was designed by one of the foremost female artists. Her name, Jeannie Gang. Her firm is Studio Gang. In 2009, she won an award for the best residential building in the world. Somebody you may have heard of if you watch the Olympics lived there for quite a while. Lady Gaga lived in that building. Now, the triangular building coming up on your right, that's another Harry Weiss. That's the Swiss Hotel, and it's in 1987. But now, folks, you get to see one of the most beautiful new additions to our skyline. This is our beautiful new Vista Tower. 101 stories, 3 interlocking turquoise towers. Notice the tallest tower has a hole in it. Why? Well, somebody forgot about wind pressure. So they took out the 83rd floor penthouse and put in what they call a blow-through, so the wind can relieve the pressure off the building. These are condos and penthouses. Interested? They start at about 16 million. The higher you go, the more they go. Okay? Where this fancy grill work is at, that, folks, is a 5++ star hotel called the St. Regis. Oh my gosh.
I know.
Remember I told you about...
Hey guys, I'm sorry about that. That went off 30 seconds early. I am very sorry about that.
Underneath it, trying to get underneath it before. Are you all cooled off now? Well, I was the first tour guide to go underneath that when it first opened. This happened and everybody was like, "You've got to be kidding me." I can't believe it. It's beautiful to watch. It's illuminated at night. What can I say?
Are you guys doing okay? Are you guys okay?
Our apologies, but if it went off 30 seconds early, he was trying to beat it. We don't like to go underneath it. Wasn't it refreshing though? You will dry off. So yeah.
Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe.